Good morning. Good to see you all this morning. It's kind of cold out there, isn't it? I know that some of the drifts and stuff are kind of deep on the way here, but we're going to get started this morning. How many of you remember what today is? What is today? How many of you married couples should have remembered what today was? Right? Valentine's Day, the day of love, right? That's what we think anyway. But the problem is that why do we have to have a holiday to think about love? Why do we have to pick a day? Honestly, love is what should be running our life. Love should be the focus of our life, and not just any love, just not any just love what the world tells us about, but God's love. God's love is something that should be on our minds every single day of our life. And if we lived that way, then our lives would look a lot different. Um, the thing about it is we look for love in all the wrong places. I think there's a country song about that. But anyway, that real love is found in God alone. And when we find God and we find God's love and we allow God's love to transform us, then that changes us. So that changes who we are and that changes. We must find God's love first. And we got to find ourselves in that. And then we can add others to that. So often we get all those things mixed up. There's a lot of people in this world that want to live life totally without God. They want God to be no part of their life. And it just doesn't work that way. We cannot love correctly without God. That is an absolute truth that we can't get around. The truth is the truth, whether we want to accept it or not. Um, I'm going to be in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. A lot of people call this the love chapter, but it just kind of explains what God's love is and how God's love works in our life. And love comes from the heart, it's from our soul. And when we have God and we've accepted Jesus as our Savior, then that changes the way we look at life, look at situations. But if we get started this morning in 1 Corinthians 13:1, it says, "Though I speak with tongues of men and of angels and have not," in my Bible it says charity, and each one of these times when it says charity, I'm going to say love because that's what it means, okay? But though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not love, I have become as a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. The thing about love is I can speak most eloquently. I can give you the perfect speech. I can do all these things. And if I don't love correctly, if I don't love the way God asked me to love, then I'm just like something that a noisemaker. How many of you at Christmas time or some kid's birthday you find great joy in giving your cousins or your in somebody else's kids something that makes lots of noise? What does that do? It aggravates you, right? It's not effective. See, the thing about it is, it says a lot of times we put on a big show. We put on it. We want people to kind of like a play or something like that. But it says is if we don't have love in our life, we're just making noise. If we don't have God's love, we're just taking up space and making noise. If you look at a lot of our news today and a lot of things, they're just making noise, aren't they? They're not effective. They're not promoting or helping anyone. See God's love, and if we live with God's love in our hearts, in our life, it's effective and it changes the way we look at life. It has to start with the heart. God's love that's when we accept God in our heart and in our soul. That's the beginning. That's the starting place. But it's also got to be in our mind. Love is also in the mind. We have to apply that. In verse 2 it says, "And though I have the gift of prophecy and understanding all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains and have not love, I am nothing." See, there's a lot of people in this world, intellectual people, that are so smart they don't believe they need God. They believe their knowledge of just the world events and just of data and all these things that makes them above God and they don't need God. See, the thing about it is even in our knowledge and our understanding, we need God's love. See, God's love is important. See, we in Wednesdays we have been studying in John about the Pharisees and all of those and the religious leaders and their hate for Jesus. And we know that as we're getting to the end of it, where they have arrested him and getting ready to crucify him. Those religious leaders had a lot of knowledge. They believed they had a lot of understanding, but they didn't have God's love in their heart. Because if they had God's love in their heart, they wouldn't have killed God's son. See, knowledge gets us in trouble. Sometimes some of the most smartest people in the world, to me, are the saddest because they're missing out. They don't just because they have knowledge does not mean they have all the answers to life. God has the answers to life, not man and his knowledge. In verse 3 it says, "And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, and have not love, it profiteth me nothing." See, there's so many things when we look into this that we got to determine to love God, and we got to do in the correct way. I can do all kinds of good things in this world, and if I don't do it for the right reasons, it's not effective. I want to give you a list of these last three verses of what it talks about. It says, if I have eloquence, if I can prophesy, if I have knowledge, and if I have faith, if I sacrifice, if I even give my life, and I give it for the wrong reasons, and I don't love God, I just do those things so I can get ahead in this world, it profits me nothing. When I take my last breath, I won't spend eternity with God if I don't have God's love in my heart. See how important that is? All of these things, and you look at people today, you look at how people do. We desire to do good, right? We do. There's all kinds of organizations out there right now that have fundraisers, they have all these programs, they have all these things. And what they're doing, and a lot of that, is they're replacing that emptiness in them that only God can fill with trying to do good deeds to make an amends for the things that they've done in their life, for the sin in our life. And even though I could speak like the angels, I could have a ministry like no one else's, I could tell you what the future holds, make great sacrifices in my life. If I don't have God, it's not worth it. See, the difference is we think that we can live life without God. People have tried it since time began. Why do we do that? Why do we try to live life without God, but we try to mimic all the things God asks us to do without God's help? You know, the big thing right now is we got to save Mother Earth. We got to save Mother Earth. Well, guess what? If we would save souls, people would make the right decisions and treat our earth and our environment and all these things differently. See, the thing about it is we get it backwards. See, God wants to give us love. He wants to have every one of us have a high moral standard, that everything we do is right, that it's not underneath the table, it's not something shady. What would you think our government and our country, especially America today, would look like if every person's moral compass was in line with God's? What would the news headlines look like? What would they look like? God gives us a lot of ideas and what we need to do, but God's love is this. In verse 4 it says, "Love suffereth long and is kind. Love envieth not. Love vaunteth not itself, and is not puffed up." I want to read it to you in this way. God's love is patient and kind. God's love isn't jealous. And God's love doesn't brag on itself. And God's love isn't arrogant. Man, we got some work to do, don't we? We got some work to do. If we looked at that, it says love, God's love. If we grab a hold of God's love, we can be patient and we can be kind. If we grab God's love and apply it to our lives, we won't be jealous of others because it seems like someone else has so much more than we have. If we grab a hold of God's love, we won't be so full of ourselves that all we can do is brag about how good we are. And we would live life humble and meek instead of arrogant and proud. See, God's love is so important that it changes our life. It changes the way we look at things. And I want to keep kind of paralleling it to the current events of today. What if our world and our country was patient and kind? What if we weren't arrogant? What if we didn't set ourselves up on a pedestal above everybody else? What if we all felt that we were all along the same playing field? That each and every one of us were hand in hand, brothers and sisters in Christ. In Ephesians 4:32, it says, "And be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you." See, as Christians, I'm speaking to Christians right now, man, we have so much to be thankful for. And we sometimes we want all the rewards that God can give us, but we don't want nobody else to have them. He says, well, change your mindset. Love like I love. How did Jesus? I can imagine Jesus was that kind of guy when he walked earth that he never met a stranger. He was kind to everyone. He could sit down and have a conversation with anyone, wherever they was from, whatever they'd done in their life. He was kind and tender-hearted and loving. And no matter what those people did, even the Roman soldiers, even the Pharisees, what was some of the last acts that Jesus did while he hung on the cross? He said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Man, we've been wronged in our life, I'm sure, by someone, or many someones. But nobody's ever strapped us to a rock and beat us beyond human recognition and nailed us to a cross and hung us till we died. Jesus was tender-hearted. Jesus was patient and kind. And he said, we need to love others and forgive others like I've loved you and I have forgiven you. Wow, that's huge, isn't it? That's a standard that, man, it's like, that's another level. In John 3:30, it says, "He must increase, but I must decrease." See, what that says there is we got to put Jesus first. Jesus has to be the number one in our life. And when he's number one in our life, it changes our motivation in life. It changes our attitude. It changes how we look at life and situations and relationships. We fail every day when we choose, I've got this under control. I can handle this. And we forget to ask Jesus to give us the strength to deal with the situations and the things going on in our life. I've got this. I can take care of it. And that's so far from the truth because we're failing miserably every day because we want to do it ourselves instead of allowing the creator of this world to mold us and guide us and strengthen us, to give us a softer heart. I know most of us probably have teenagers right now that we have no idea how to deal with. That's going crazy. And it's like, man, if I just had the right words, right? Have you ever been there? That a lot of times the words that come out of our mouth aren't the right words. We're not showing love. And they need that. Our kids need that. Our families need that. Our communities need that. We need God's love in our hearts. So when we open our mouths, it's God's love coming out and not us. And not us. 1 Corinthians 13:5 says, "Doth not behave itself unseemly, and seeketh not her own, and is not easily provoked, and thinketh no evil." You know, as Christians sometimes, I think people are guilty of being unapproachable. Almost to the thought of that there's this thing out there that Christians think they're better than everybody else. Or if you get a group of people that they kind of go overboard, and have you ever seen that Christian person or that church goer that they go, that guy's not right. You know what I mean? It's like we can live life. Jesus was approachable. Jesus was that kind of guy that you just want to go up and talk to, right? We can't behave ourselves as Christians in a way that people don't want to be around us. That people think that there's something wrong with us or we went over the top. You know, if you're all on fire with Jesus, they're probably going to think something's wrong with us. But we don't have to add to that. We ought to be able to be the kind of people that people want to approach, that people want to spend time with. And it tells us how to do that. It says that we seek not our own, we're not easily provoked, and we think no evil. We have no evil thoughts. Jesus never had an evil thought in the entire time he was on earth. Never once. I could imagine many times he would have been justified, if you want to put it that way, that he could have had evil thoughts about those people that sought to kill him, but he did not. Christians should not act rudely. God's love doesn't seek reward. How many times in a relationship or things that we see somebody says, well, I will do this for you if you do this for me. There's a lot of people out there today that just won't do something for someone out of the goodness of their heart. What do I get out of it? See, Christians, we can't do that. We have to just do what God asks us to do if we never get rewarded. But the most awesome thing is when we humble ourselves and we just serve with a whole heart, we're being rewarded. We just may not receive that reward until we get to heaven. We are a people that want rewards immediately or in advance, right? How many people want paid in advance before we do something? We need to see that. But God's love is also slow to anger. I think that's something that you see in most of people today is it doesn't take much to get us mad. It's almost like we're waiting to get mad, right? We see that especially. I don't know, it's a whole different world, I guess, but you see that in teenagers today especially, I guess, that they're just ready to explode. When we have God's love, we're slow to anger. God takes that away. God's love has no bad thoughts. None. Wouldn't that be awesome to not have a bad thought ever? Not even go a little further, that not to get down because things aren't going your way, or depressed, or anxious, or any of those things. God just is God. No matter what comes at him, he has the same thought. He has the same heart. We need that. We need to be consistent in our life, that we're not on a roller coaster of emotions in our life, that we just go straight through, and no matter what the world throws at us, we know that we're going to be victorious, that we're never going to be taken away from God, and that we have a place in heaven someday. In verse 6 it says, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth. Man, there's a lot of people rejoicing in immorality today. A lot of people rejoicing in a lie, living a life a lie. How many people do not want to hear the truth? I was talking the other day, we was at work the other day, and I don't know what that Tom Cruise movie is, but one of the famous lines is, he goes, so they was talking to him in the stands and was telling him something about the truth, and he goes, you couldn't handle the truth. I can't remember what that movie was about or the name of it, but you know, a lot of times we don't want the truth. We can't handle the truth. But the truth is what we need to hear. We need to hear that truth and apply it to our life, no matter what it is, even if there's consequences in our life. We need to be able to bear that, to rejoice in the truth. A lot of people live a fake life. They live a life with a mask on. We need to live in the truth. When we live in the truth, it changes who we are. It changes the way we look at things. In verse 7, we go right into it. It says, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, and endureth all things. When we grasp the truth instead of the lie that Satan is speaking to our hearts, we can bear all things. We can endure all things. We can handle all situations. See how God's love is a process where as we grow and we grab a hold of His truth and we say, God, I can't do this. I need you. That's when He can become effective in our life, and we start seeing the rewards of that. I want to read this here. It says, God's love believes in you. God believes in each and every one of you. He believes that there is someone inside there that is better than what we're being. God's love will protect us. See, God can protect us from the things of the devil if we let Him. God's love is an optimist. He may, even though that he knows that maybe we're going the wrong direction, he knows there's hope for you and me. He never gives up on you and me. God's love remains strong even through testing. You know, when we have a trial in our life, it definitely shows how close to God we are. See, when we have God's love in our hearts, when we use God's love, it remains strong even though it seems like our life is falling apart and the devil is kicking down every door that we have. It remains strong. And God's love is expressed through patience and kindness, without envy and without boasting. See, it just keeps us at this level playing field that we're humble. And no matter what happens in our life, we're the same. Something else we need to understand and realize and is God's love is permanent. God's love will never leave. It doesn't have an expiration date. It doesn't run out. They don't have a 90-day warranty. God's love is permanent. In verse 8 it says, "Love never faileth. But whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. And whether there be tongues, they shall cease. And whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away." See, everything in this world is going to vanish away except God's love. See, so many people are so worried about building a name for themselves or an empire or their bank account or all these things. And all those things will mean nothing at the end of days. When you draw your last breath in life, it won't matter how much money you have in your bank account or how much land you owned or how much people thought of you. What the most important thing will be is, did you ever accept God's love? Did you ever accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? That's the greatest treasure that we could ever possibly have. That's that important. We only see a glimpse of God's love right now. How many of us would like to know what the future holds? How many of us would say, if I only knew what tomorrow held, then I'd be okay today? You know what God tells us? I'm not going to tell you. What's he say? The just shall live by faith. Trust in me. There's a song, a hymn, trust and obey. Trust in me and obey my commandments, and I will protect you. I will love you. I will take care of you. I've got this. Especially right now, driving over here in the roads, kind of slick. Some of you may have been trying to cut a donut or something. Do things like that. How many times have you been doing some of those things and realized you actually really didn't have control and you were just along for the ride? Right? I've been there, having a little bit of fun, doing these things, and you get to spinning, and all of a sudden what happens? You get to spinning faster. You get to spinning faster. And you know what happens sometimes? You find that ditch or that light pole, and you stop immediately, don't you? See, it's just an illusion that we're in control in this world. The devil would tell, I'll probably do some of that when I leave here today. But the devil tells us we're in control and we don't need God. And we get to spinning faster and faster out of control till we hit something hard. See, we need God's love. We need to allow him to work in our life. 9 through 12 it says, "For we know in part, and we prophesy in part." See, we only know part of the story. "But when that which is perfect is come, but when that which is complete is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. When I was a child, I spake as a child, and I understood as a child. I thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know, even as also I am known." There are stages in our life. As a child, there was my motivation, the things that I sought out, what my future looked like was a lot different than what my future and what I think about today. As we go through life, it's a process of growing. As just as much as the writer put in here is speaking of a child, speaking, and then as he grew up. Um, there's two parts here, one of the human and one of the spiritual. As we are a child, we have a bottle and we drink milk and we don't have solid foods. And sometimes we have solid foods. And then older as we get, we change the way we live. And spiritually, we need to do the same thing as children of God. We can't always be drinking the milk. We got to be growing, and we got to be allowing God to be a part of our life. And not knowing what tomorrow holds will be okay. That thing, a just shall live by faith. God says, I've got this. I'm in control. That song that Carrie Underwood said, Jesus, take the wheel. Man, we need to say that to God every day. I want you to take the wheel of my life and guide me. In verse 13 it says, and now abiding faith, hope, and love, these three, but the greatest of these is love. See, the most awesome and the greatest thing that we could possibly ever have in our life is God's love. We can't live without it. There's so many people out there today that are trying to live without God's love. Every time I'm standing in line at the grocery store or Walmart, I kind of smile and I look at those tabloids and those magazines and think, this is what the world tells you what perfection is. This is what the world tells you success is. This is what the world tells us, that we must do anything we possibly can to achieve that. Stardom, money, fame, position. Then you read the tabloids. $10 million divorce, drug rehab, arrested, wrecks. And you look in there and I don't see fame and fortune and success in life. I see pain and misery. See, fame and fortune and money and position in life will get us nowhere. It won't even make us happy. Most of them movie stars and all those people, I think they're probably some of the most miserable people in the world. They put a mask on and tell you how happy they are. The key to true happiness is God's love. You know, Valentine's Day is one of those holidays that everybody's supposed to buy somebody something special, get them a card, do this or do that. Man, we need to love people every day, not just on a holiday. If the world loved like we're supposed to love on February 14th, if we love 365 days a year, what would we look like? What would we look like? As we get ready to close this morning, I want you to think about this. I'm going to read verse 13 again. It says, and now abiding faith and hope and love, these three, but the greatest of these is love. God's love is the greatest thing that we could possibly ever gain. And guess what? It's free. God freely gives his love to you and me. All we got to do is accept it. Thank you.